So CookieRun Tower of Adventures just released, and like all gacha games before it, every character is given classifications. In Genshin, characters have their vision and a weapon type. In Honkai Star Rail, characters have an element and a path that they follow. And in CookieRun Kingdom, characters have their position and a class, and so on and so forth. For CookieRun Tower of Adventures, all characters can be identified with three things. Their first thing is their element, which is pretty straightforward. It typically matches their aesthetic and is mostly used for weaknesses and team building and whatnot. Their attack type, which is also really straightforward, it's the way that they attack. Slash cookies, so slash, range cookies, or ranged, you get it. And finally, their role, which is the part that a cookie will play in a team. While the first two are fairly easy to grasp in both concept and in play, the role of a cookie, while, still simple, has a little bit more depth that might make it so not everyone understands it and its purpose. And if you are not everyone, then this video is for you. Now, the first role we have is going to be the fighter role. The fighter is your average main DPS. Their entire job is doing as much damage as possible, as fast as possible. They are your core, and who your team will be built around in terms of your sub-DPS and support choices. As a fighter, Cream Soda's entire job is to just do damage. Now, every fighter dishes this damage out in different ways, and I feel like I found some categories that they can be separated into. So the first category we have are the burst DPS. What they specialize is high amounts of damage in lesser amounts of attacks. They are also typically going to be clunkier and slower attacking. So, for example, Dark Choco Cookie. He attacks slower, but his attacks have massive damage multipliers, and his main damage source being his charged up basic attack. You gotta charge it up. You can't do as many of them because you have to charge it up. But you get this massive 400% damage multiplier. And even his skill, it's a singular hit with a high 14-second cooldown, but 750% damage. So you hit that, it's like a nuke. And, again, his ultimate, 30-second cooldown, one singular hit, but you have this massive 1150% damage multiplier. So the entire thing with burst DPS is just they do a lot of damage, but they attack slower instead of just being like lots of attacks. Now the next category is going to be the flurry DPS. They are the complete opposite of the burst, and instead of attacking slower with bigger hits, they attack faster with smaller hits. So as opposed to Dark Choco's like 100, 120, 150 multiplier, each of Rai Cookie's attacks hit for 78%, which isn't low, but it's like not massive. And like this is where a lot of her damage is coming from. And again, in her skill, this is reflected. 20 hits, but each only does 65%. Now, that's not bad. Not at all. That's not bad. But it's the fact that it's a lot of it, which is why it's a lot. Not because the percentage isn't a lot. It's the amount of hits. And again, in her ultimate, 6 times, 65%. Now, a lot of this damage is coming from the finishing shot, but that's fine because her consistent damage is coming from these two things, as opposed to Dark Choco, where your consistent damage is coming from his charge of attack. So, yeah, flurry DPS, attack a lot, each attack, not a lot, but together, attack is a lot. You get it. So, the third and final attack category is going to be the mix attackers. They are the in-between, they are the balance, they are what is not a burst, what is not a flurry. So Cream Soda is going to be the example, as she wants to weave in basic attacks after each use of her skill and ultimate to utilize damage from her passive. Now, she's kind of an outlier because her multipliers are just crazy. She's really, really busted. But generally, in a combo, she's going to attack roughly 9 times, because you have 3 of these, 1 of these, and then 4 of these to stack up her passive, and then 1 final one to get her after school sparring max damage. So, yeah. She's not a burst, she's not a flurry, she's a mix attacker. And that's because, even though she doesn't attack as many times as Rai, which is a lot, she still attacks a decent amount. She attacks more than the 3-hit combo king of Dark Choco. But each hit hits more than Rai does. So, there's that. So, yeah, essentially, mixed attackers are just the in-between. Yeah. There really isn't much more to say about fighters, as they are pretty straightforward. Like, to summarize, their whole goal is to do damage, and they are the core of the team. There really isn't much else to say, because they do damage, so we are going to move on to the next role. Now, the next role is in a weird place because it is fundamentally unique to CookieRun Tower of Adventures, and that role is the Tagger role. Now, the Tagger in other gacha games would be classified as a sub-DPS. They act as a secondary damage source, and in some cases will directly or indirectly increase the damage output of your main DPS/fighter. But what separates the Tagger from the sub-DPS is a mechanic that is unique to this game, which is the Elemental Burst mechanic. No, not the one from Genshin. Now, the Elemental Burst mechanic can only be used when an ability has the Elemental Tag description, which, only taggers have. As you can see with Gumball Cookie, both of his abilities have the Elemental Tag. So, essentially, what the Elemental Tag does is, whenever an enemy is hit with an ability that has the Elemental Tag description, they will get a little mark above their head, or an Elemental Tag above their head. And whenever this enemy is attacked, that will fill up the Burst gauge. And whenever the Burst gauge is full, it activates the Elemental Burst mechanic. Now, Gumball Cookie would apply the Water Tag. So, if another Water Cookie, like Cream Soda Cookie, hits an enemy with the Water Tag, it will naturally fill it faster than if someone like Crushed Pepper Cookie were to do that. I should also add that the stronger the cookie activating the Elemental Burst is, the stronger the actual Elemental Burst damage will be. Oh, I should probably explain what the Elemental Burst is. It's just a burst of damage. It is really, really simple. It is a burst of elemental damage, like the name. Now, the entire mechanic isn't that complicated, but I still think it's, pretty interesting, and is something that you should always be utilizing in a team, as it adds a ton of extra damage. So, yeah, please use this. And outside of the Elemental Tag and Elemental Burst mechanic, there is no real set of rules for what a tagger should do. So the cast is pretty diverse as of right now. So my first example is going to be Gumball Cookie. So Gumball Cookie's entire thing is slowing down enemies with his skill and ultimate, and lowering their water resistance. So by lowering their water resistance, it means they take more damage from water sources like Cream Soda Cookie. Hence why you want to run Cream Soda Cookie with Gumball Cookie, because he indirectly increases her damage output, while he himself is a good sub DPS because his damage multipliers aren't low by any means in his special and his ultimate. As you can see, that's 490%, 5 times. That's a lot of damage. This is 600% damage, which is a lot. But typically their basic attack is going to have lower damage. That is not that much damage. But hence why he's a sub DPS, not a main DPS. The next example is Plantain Cookie, who I don't have. I have his artifact though. So Plantain Cookie is another good example because his passive grants him and other cookies movement speed after he hits them. So his damage, like Gumball, mainly lies in his skill in his ultimate with massive multipliers. That is a lot of damage. But it doesn't really lie in his basic attack. Sure, that looks like a lot of damage, but realistically, if you're running him with a full team of 3, you're gonna use these 2 and then swap out. But that's also why he's a good sub DPS, because he has a lot of really fast damage while also making his team fast, and hence sub DPS. But again, that's the entire point. He's a tagger sub DPS. He applies the elemental tag, he does damage, then he swaps back out. I forgot to mention that he's ideally Rye Cookie sub DPS because you do want to match tagger with fighter. But unlike Gumball Cookie, he doesn't have anything specific to fellow Wind Cookies, which is fine. It's not necessarily needed, as, again, they are all different, there is no set criteria. And our final example is Twisted Donut Cookie. And back to that topic of no set criteria, unlike the other two before him, he doesn't buff his teammates at all. There's nothing here that talks about any kind of buff. But what he is an off-field sub DPS, as his entire damage sources come from his turrets, which means you can swap into him, place his turrets, swap back out. So, even though he doesn't have those buffs that the other two have, he's not necessarily a bad Earth sub DPS, because he's constantly dealing Earth damage and constantly reapplying that elemental tag. So to summarize taggers are the sub DPS of this game. Their job is to enable the elemental tag mechanic. They typically have some kind of high burst damage or some kind of off-field damage. Their goal is to assist your main DPS in dealing damage, but they are not a replacement for fighters, as their jobs are fundamentally different. And last, but certainly not least, is the support role. Now, the role is pretty straightforward, as its job is in its name, and its job is to support allies, but they do it by mitigating damage and providing them buffs. Now, I use the term damage mitigation as it covers both healing and shielding, which is what supports do, as healing restores HP that is lost, and shielding prevents HP from being lost. So, they mitigate the damage. Now, buffing, it can be things like increasing the attack of cookies, the HP, the movement speed, etc., etc. So after looking at all of the supports in the game, the one requirement seems to be that they must be able to heal or shield allies, as that is their sole purpose. So if we take a look here, Muscle Cookie is able to provide shields with his passive, skill, and ultimate. Angel Cookie can heal with their skill and ultimate. Pistachio Cookie provides shields with her skill and ultimate. Chamomile provides healing with her Teapot skill and her ultimate. Rockstar provides it with his skill, Rock Spirit. And finally, Crushed Pepper provides it with his passive and his ultimate. And this requirement of healing and shielding is something that prevents cookies like Plantain Cookie from being a support, because obviously he doesn't heal or shield, even though he provides that nice movement speed buff. Now I'm going to quickly talk about a few of the supports. Now first of all is Chamomile Cookie. Now, a support like Chamomile Cookie really only heals, and while she does do a little bit of damage, it's not truly anything that matters. She really serves no other purpose besides healing. And because of this lack of other features in her kit, that's actually why she has the highest healing output in the game. And, while that sounds nice on paper, wow, she's the best healer, you lose out on any other potential benefits. But again, she does a lot of healing. On the flip side, we have Rockstar Cookie, who, unlike Chamomile, puts his healing on the back burner for other parts of his kit. He actually has pretty high damage multipliers, 130 for his attack, and his damage isn't really anything to laugh at. But granted, you are going to be focusing on mostly healing substats. And another thing he has is an attack increase, hence why they have to make sure his healing isn't too powerful, yet it still exists. Because if they just make his healing as high as Chamomile, he's just clearly the better option. But because he increases the attack of cookies and provides damage himself, he's actually, quite interesting. But, again, he doesn't do a ton of healing. Just like how Chamomile, while doing a ton of healing, doesn't have the things that Rockstar does. In a completely different position is Crushed Pepper Cookie. While he's a support, I would say the term tank or defender would actually be more fitting, as that's what he would probably be called in most other games. And that's because he can prevent damage just as much as he can dish it out. But I guess the term support still technically fits, as in concept, tanks support the team by preventing them from, going kablooey. So, I guess it's fine. So to summarize, supports must have some sort of sustain, like healing or shielding. Their goal is to keep allies alive while assisting them in other ways, like with damage or buffs. They typically consist of healers, like Chamomile, Rockstar, and Angel, who restore HP, or they consist of tanks, like Crushed Pepper, Muscle, and Pistachio, who prevent HP loss. Well, that's about it. I tried my best to not complicate it too much while still providing some insight for y'all. I know I probably yapped a little too much, but that's okay. And if you enjoyed it, it'd be nice if you liked the video, but you don't have to, but like, whatever, so yeah. Anyways, until next time, bye!